There we go. So good afternoon. I'm Peter Mosses, and this will be mainly a demo-focused presentation. My title is a bit too long for comfort and not terribly memorable. A bit too long for comfort and not very memorable. So let me start by trying to simplify the title a bit. Just go away remembering hyperlinked twins, or linked twins if you prefer, and you can also visit that website that's shown there. The URL is in the paper as well on the first page, so you don't need to spend time noting it down. Okay, so in the paper, there's an introduction and it explains what name-based code navigation is and what software meta-languages are, and refers to some prior examples of websites that can be thought of as hyperlinked twins. It also discusses technical details of generating hyperlinked twin websites in general using any IDE or language workbench. And it also reports on experience of using Spoofax for that purpose. Has anybody here heard of Spoofax? Okay, that's pretty encouraging, thank you. One of the reviewers, in fact the expert reviewer, was kind enough to comment on the paper that it was blissfully short. Perhaps this demonstration will hopefully, I took it as a compliment, not as an insult, and I hope this demonstration will also be at least reasonably simple and easy to follow. In the demo, I'll be demonstrating, first of all, what it's like to do name-based navigation online in a GitHub repository, in a carefully chosen GitHub repository that doesn't support it very well, of course, and then showing how much better it is to do it locally in Spoofax, and then show what benefit a hyperlinked twin gives you, in allowing you to do that same navigation as in Spoofax online in an ordinary web browser without any fuss. And finally, I hope to demonstrate the actual generation process that created the particular hyperlinked website that I'll be showing you. Okay, let me now switch to a browser, if I can do that. This is a GitHub repository. It's not a hyperlinked twin, and in fact, hyperlinked twins are designed not to look like GitHub repositories, so you won't mistake them for these things. This is a language project that can be downloaded to Spoofax and used in Spoofax, and it has all the source code for that project online in GitHub. And, well, let me go straight to show you what it looks like in GitHub, what I would call dead code, and you can just browse it, but if you try to click on symbols, well, you can click on a symbol, but it doesn't do anything. And if we, for instance, browse down and we see something interesting that we like, for instance, this OK single expression, OK, we could type a slash in GitHub, and there is some search facility on the repository. So if we insert our name and a return, then we get some results. And in this case, about 35, no, actually about 40 matches altogether, none of which, at least the first ones you see are not the definition of this symbol, but references to it. If we show more of these matches, then the first definition that we see is actually for a slightly longer word that has an S on the end. We could have avoided that by putting quote marks, I think, around the word when we searched for it. And if we browse down a bit further, then we actually find the definition that we might have been looking for. So there's also another way of that we can search on GitHub. If we go back to that previous page, at the top of the file, you see this little symbol here. it says Open Symbols panel. That sounds encouraging. Let's do that. Oh, symbol outline not available for this file. Try clicking on the symbol. Well, we already did that. That doesn't do anything. And then we could see which languages are supported. So there's a nice page about navigating code on the GitHub and some, I'll make it a bit bigger here. So there's some really popular languages like C# and Python and Java, of course, JavaScript supported. But the language that we've just been trying to browse in, which is called statics, isn't actually there, and there's no immediate prospect of it coming there in the near future. So my experience anyway, and I don't know about yours, but if you meet an unfamiliar GitHub repository and try to find your way around in the hundreds of files in some unfamiliar language, then it's a pretty painful process, and it can be very frustrating. And this is what's driven me to do this work that I'm going to report on today. So let me go back to the presentation. So that was how it went in GitHub online. Let's see now how it looks in Spoofax locally. And well, let me say first of all that to do this locally, you need three things. You need to download the project from GitHub to have it locally on your computer. You need also to have Spoofax installed locally, which is easy enough. You can download that, and it's just bundled with Eclipse, so you can have it as an app, at least on a Mac, and it works on other platforms as well. But the third thing that you need to actually be effective in that is you need really some experience with using Eclipse and preferably also Spoofax. If you have that experience, then that's an obvious way to do it, and that's what the developers of Spoofax themselves do, and the other users of Spoofax. They download projects, and they already have Spoofax installed, so it's no bother, and they already have the experience of using Eclipse and Spoofax. But if you're not one of those developers, then you may find it a bit of a learning curve to get efficient with using Spoofax, apart from the download bother. So now let me switch to showing you that same file in how it looks in the Spoofax editor. I'm not going to show you everything here. I see I haven't cleaned it, so maybe I should actually clean it. I don't know why I didn't do that in advance. Sorry about that. It'll just clean that, and then all those little red marks will disappear, and we'll be able to browse things properly. It doesn't take very long, luckily. So let's look at that same file again. And once it's cleaned, then I should be able to click on this symbol. Let me just check what's happening in the console while we're doing that. That was unprofessional, I think, that I should have prepared that in advance. So my project I was cleaning. Let's see what happened there. Yeah. So I need to show the actual console window. Oh no, actually it's here. As you see, I'm not a terribly experienced user of Spoofax myself, but it's building, and as soon as that finishes building, then we'll be able to navigate okay. That's the kind of confusion that you can get into when you first start using Spoofax. Almost as if I could demonstrate that deliberately. This language is a fairly complex language involving two meta-languages, SDF3 and statics, and in particular statics does take a little bit of time to build. Just let's finish building, and then I think we're ready to go. These things take a terribly long time when you're actually in a demo and waiting for it to finish. It's not too bad if you're sitting at your own terminal it doesn't seem to usually take that long, but Otherwise, I'll go to the next stage of the demo, which is already prepared and cleaned. Yeah, there we go. This is now finally about to finish. So what I'll do is just show that at least when we have this cleaned, and the reason it didn't navigate before was that I hadn't been patient enough and given it time to finish building. But now it has finished building, and now when I go to that, you see that all these symbols are actually links, and I can simply click on that, and it will take me straight to the definition of that symbol, and the same for all the other symbols that you have there, and you can click around to your heart's content. So sorry for the delay with that. As I say, if you have Spoofax and experience and everything installed and downloaded, then and you get these things cleaned and built properly, then no problem. But the idea of a hyperlinked twin is to avoid all that hassle. So let's go back to an ordinary browser now, and there is actually, for that same language specification, which is not my language specification, it's somebody else's that I just found on the internet. It's at that location. You can browse it yourselves if you want. It's a significant language. It's been used and developed for other purposes. If we now go and look in this hyperlinked twin, we can just, for instance, click on the names that occur in the imports here and go straight to the corresponding file, and we can browse through that, and we can find the relevant line that we were thinking of having this OK single expression. Click on that, and again we go straight to the definition. So if you like name-based navigation, if you don't like drilling down through hierarchies of files, then you can browse around and click around on your hyperlinked twin in the same way that you can do it in Spoofax. And the idea is that by generating a hyperlinked twin, using Spoofax from the internal information in Spoofax, you'll get exactly the same navigation in the hyperlinked twin with name-based navigation as you have in Spoofax. You don't need to check it afterwards. It's automatically done. I could show some more examples of hyperlinked twins, but let me now go and to the next bit of the final bit of the talk, which is to talk about generation of these hyperlinked twins. There's a description essentially in the paper that I won't go through in detail here that is telling you the steps that you need to do, essentially generating some HTML and inserting some things in it to get those hyperlinks there. It's pretty straightforward stuff. And in principle, I claim that you could do that using any IDE or language workbench, and other people might like to do it. But I've been using Spoofax to do it. So let me just try and visualize the generation process. So on GitHub, we have a repo with a language specification or some other code. We need to make a local clone. This is for the generation process, not for browsing the hyperlinked twin. This is for generating it in the first place. So we use Git to make a local clone. And then this is where Spoofax comes in. We inject into a clone of the repo or a fork if you need to publish a fork. Insert the sources for the generated web pages. For every code file in the supported language, you insert actually a markdown file that is mostly just HTML. You can also preview it locally before you publish it. You can use make.docs serve to just serve a local preview and browse that to your heart's content and check that it looks okay. And once you've done that, you can just push the changes in the source files, or the new source files here. You just push them to GitHub, sorry, at least if you're using GitHub, then there's a continuous integration action that will then deploy that published website to GitHub Pages. In fact, the one we were looking at is on GitHub Pages. And that's all pretty automatic. So the only thing you need to do in Spoofax is after you've imported and cleaned that language project is you need to choose a menu option. So let me demonstrate that now before I go to the concluding slide. and I need to switch to the development version of SpoofAx, where I have been careful to clean the project in advance. And for this statics file, I need to choose a menu item which is evocatively called generate website. And so, yeah, you can see that it's going on down here. It takes a little bit of time, but it is doing a fair amount of name analysis, and well, it's done some name analysis, but it's using that name analysis quite heavily during the generation process. Each of these lines is for generating a particular source of a web page that we can then afterwards push to GitHub, or we can preview it just using, for instance, when this finishes, which is it's just about to finish, then I'll just show you the terminal command that just brings up a preview, and there we are. That was the generation process for that hyperlinked twin. So it's not like something that lasts half a day. It's rather straightforward. And then to preview it, you just type make.serve, and then it'll also pretty quickly serve a local copy of that hyperlinked website. You can do that before you push it to GitHub, just to check. And as I say, well, let's just check that local website is there. This was when the server had been stopped. So yeah, there it is. So we could browse that, and everything will be there. I'll just show you the syntax while we're here as well. That again, you have all these names. So that was the demonstration. Let me just go back to the presentation, and so the conclusion is that if you get interested in SpoofAx and you specify or define your language, whether it's a DSL or a programming language or a meta language, using SpoofAx, that means defining its syntax, its name binding analysis, and also some highlighting, otherwise you won't get the colors, then you can generate hyperlinked twins using SpoofAx. At least when the demonstrated code that I used in the demo has actually been incorporated and reviewed and included in a release of SpoofAx. So yeah, thank you for your attention.
We have time for questions, please. Yes, please, Eric.
Thanks, Peter. So if I'm not a SpoofAx user and I have some other system for designing languages and want to do the same thing, so like in Silver, right, we generate some kind of information like this for a language server protocol for going to declarations and stuff. What would be involved in sort of stepping into this process some way along and saying, well, I don't have SpoofAx, I have something else, but I also want to generate a bunch of web pages? Well, is there a convenient place for that, or is it just a?
I would suspect the easiest route is assuming that your language workbench has facilities for browsing, for traversing and transforming analyzed abstract syntax trees into strings, which it probably does, right?
Suppose, yeah.
Then you could take a look at the rather small amount of Stratego code that actually implements this in SpoofAx, and implement in whatever favorite scripting language you have for doing it in your own, and generate your own websites. The alternative would be to starting to specify your meta languages in SpoofAx and transport the whole generation process into SpoofAx. But I don't know, it could be interesting to look at defining the meta language you use in your language workbench as a SpoofAx language, and then you get this for free, basically.
It's very cool. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Have you considered exposing the ability to users of the object language to define their own custom notions of name binding? I know the Linux kernel has a similar system called Elixir, and there are several like operating system specific notions of name binding they have across modules to facilitate its own internal module structure and browsing that.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch it. The trouble is the loudspeakers are pointing in your direction and not in mine.
Sorry. Have you considered allowing users of the object language to specify their own notions of name binding, in addition to the normal, like you can look up a variable?
Yeah, I mean, the meta-language statics that's used nowadays in Spoofax was developed by Ilko Visser, who unfortunately is no longer with us. And I mean, he loved, by the way, always to demonstrate Spoofax, and he did it far better than I do. I mean, he wouldn't make that mistake with not having cleaned a project. So it's a very general language, and you can specify all kinds of name binding for different languages. There are maybe some theoretical limitations concerning polymorphism and things like that, but whatever object language you want to deal with, then it'd be interesting if you think it's difficult to specify it in this statics language.
Right. I mean, like, it's like internal to the object language. Like for the case of the Linux kernel, their object language is C, but beneath that, within the system they're building, they have their own sort of notion of names. They're just strings. Yeah. It's possible to extract that statically, but have you considered like giving the users power to do so? Yeah.
I'm just not familiar with that context, so I really can't answer that in detail.
Okay.
Sorry.
By the way, when I think on Spoofax, name binding, name analysis, I always think in this wonderful paper of Wilco on scopes as types. Is that related to your work? Are you using it in some way, that technique?
I'm just exploiting the statics meta-language, which is also based on scope graphs, which is closely inspired and related by scopes as types. One of the co-authors of scopes as types is down there and could probably answer that better than I can.
Great work.
But it's basically, this is a very simple thing that I've done. It hasn't required me writing any grammars or name analysis. I'm simply taking what's there and using the Stratego API that gives me access to the parse trees and the analyzed syntax trees and the name binding analysis, and then I can just traverse that in Stratego, and it's really pretty straightforward. It's only a few hundred lines of Stratego code at the most, so it's in a sense building on top of all that work that people have done with meta languages like statics and scopes as types, but it didn't require me to have any knowledge of the details of that.
Okay. One last question, please.
So, thank you for the talk. Making the code accessible in this manner is, well, very useful. I was wondering if you had also considered the integration with the documentation, and maybe if I'm not familiar with how Spoofax does this, but is there some documentation system that also generates a website that would integrate well with your approach?
Yes. Thank you for the question. Yes, documentation is very important, and also I think literate programming, where you have an interleaving of informal text with snippets of formal specification. And in fact, in previous work in a project called CBS, I've demonstrated how to support that kind of language that combines informal explanation with the formal notation. But regarding existing documentation frameworks, like JavaDoc or something like that, then I haven't investigated that at all. But I don't think there's anything built into Spoofax that would automatically do that. But it's a very general toolkit, and lots of things are possible in Spoofax.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter.